So thank you all for being here. This is our last session for our first week of FCI Live 2024. We have a whole nother week coming up. Hope you'll join us next week for over 11 sessions. But tonight, we're here with Gabby Davis from National Co-op Grocers for the session supporting neurodiverse staff and customers. I know some of you sent some questions ahead of time. Gabby gave her email for that, and I hope you guys did get a chance to send some of those in. Looking forward to this conversation. Gabby always brings some really thought-provoking stuff to the table, and I'm going to turn it over to her.
Thank you. Can y'all somebody give me a thumbs up, Bertha? I can see your screen, your face. So can you give me a thumbs up if you can see the screen? All right, cool. Okay, if I go too fast, just ask me to back up and I'll go back to it if we still have time. But like JQ said, you will receive the slides and all the resources that come with it. My mouse was frozen. Give me 1 second. It's just I've had no computer troubles all day. Okay, there we go. Oh, now it's moving really fast. I'm not sure if this is Zoom or my mouse. I'm gonna just let it be for now, but this presentation was created by and for community members at co-op. So that means staff that work at co-ops, leaders, staff that work at co-ops, leaders, and customers. So normally with my job, I'm the racial equity and food justice manager, and that means a lot of things to different people. But with my job, I get the privilege of being inside of a lot of co-ops and working with a lot of co-ops. And so usually if I hear things more than once or twice or 3 times, I'm like, man, that must be a group need for the co-op community. And if I have the knowledge to share, I'll build from it, or I'll find somebody who can, right? JQ, are you still seeing a together slide? Okay. I'm not sure. I don't know if it's Zoom or my computer that's doing this right now. Did it move for y'all too? Like a bunch of slides go past? Or
yes.
has it been going? Okay.
And it looks like we're seeing a presenter view rather than a participant view also.
Maybe, yeah. So you can see the little, can you see the little circle going in circles?
Nope.
Okay. Thanks for that. Let me see if I can. I'm going to try to reshare.
Okay.
All right. Okay. And what do you still see presenter view or no?
Nope. Now we're seeing regular view. That's much better.
Okay. We'll see. We'll see what happens. Are you seeing a together slide or are they all moving fast?
They're all moving fast again now.
Oh, wow. And my screen sharing is paused. So it might be a Zoom thing because my screen sharing says pause now.
Huh.
Have you had any?
No.
Okay. Okay. I'm gonna try one more thing, and then JQ, I'm gonna ask you to share for me. Okay.
Okay.
Can y'all see full screen? Full screen? Yes.
We're seeing
okay.
Full screen. All right.
All right. I'm not sure what happened. I think it was a Zoom glitch though. Anywho, nonetheless, during this time, please take care of yourself. I don't need a lot of attention, but you can have your camera on or camera off. Do what's best for you. I guess the bottom note is most important. Don't hold your pee or poop for me, because I promise I won't do it for anybody, not just here, but at all. So, take care of yourself during all of this. Any presentation I make, the objectives are always the same, regardless of what you've read about this presentation, is to remove barriers or create opportunities. So in this case, for food co-ops that are on their way to be open or newly open, is to remove barriers for people to shop or work and to create opportunities for people to shop or work. right? And we all have a part in that. Like JQ said, please interrupt me. I have a hard time waiting to the end to get an answer. I will start Googling if I needed to know it really bad, and then I'm no longer able to participate fully because I'm too busy Googling. So if I say something that you don't understand or you want clarified, please feel free to interrupt me, text me, or throw it in the chat. Okay. Okay, important things to know. Any stories that are told during this time, I never know what I'm going to say because it's just, whatever happens. They come from co-ops or cooperators or myself, and I have consent to share all of these things, okay? The first thing to share is diagnosis is a privilege or luck. And so oftentimes as you get ready to open a store, if you have a store open, that comes up. Reasonable accommodations are always a hot topic seemingly with HR and employees, and what can we do to be more open to everybody? ADA has not been updated since 2008, and a lot of the accommodations there do not include any mental health condition. With that being said, everybody doesn't have a diagnosis, and it's not because they don't want one or feel like they need one. A lot of it is because of the assumption that comes along with that. I am 41 years old and I was diagnosed with ADHD in 2017, right? And the luck part of that is that when this happened, I was finishing up a program to be a mental health therapist, and my teacher, my professor at the time, pulled me to the side like, hey, let's chat. And we started talking about this, like the things she had observed from me in class, and everything made sense that happened prior to that. Every single thing made sense. But for me, I just had to learn how to do things different. I didn't know it was a thing in lots of communities, and I know in a lot of Black and Brown communities, there is no thing about going to get support, especially, not really now. It's a lot better now, but, back in, I'm thinking the olden days, but I mean like the 80s, the 80s and 90s, that wasn't a thing, right? You don't go see a therapist. You go get some more sleep, you go lay down, you drink some water, you work harder, you stay more focused, but I just couldn't. So I had to put all these things into place, right? And so that's when I say it is a privilege. Other things is everybody doesn't have access to mental health care, right? And even then, some healthcare professionals don't believe in it either, don't believe there are such things as anybody with a brain different from theirs, right? Because there is no normal. Normal is a setting on a washing machine, right? We all have different types of brains and function differently. Then if we do have access to healthcare, mental healthcare, we might not know how to navigate it, right? Just recently, I got COVID for my first time in December. And when I tested positive, and this is going to talk about privilege too, immediately went to go put a mask on because my wife was home and my niece was there. I put a mask on. And I got a doctor's appointment within 5 minutes through urgent care online, a video appointment. Within 10 minutes, I was online with a physician. And within 20 minutes, my prescription for Paxlovid was at the pharmacy, right? So far that meant I had to have $25 to pay that copay for urgent care. I have money to pay for a prescription. I had the privilege of having the upstairs and downstairs, so I didn't have to leave my house, or my wife didn't have to leave. I just had to stay on one floor, right? And then somebody could go get my medicine for me and get the things I need and help me, right? So there's a lot of privilege involved to accessing that type of support. The stigma with asthma help, the whispers. And so when you share certain things about you, a lot of times there are a lot of assumptions made, right? And so, in places I've worked in healthcare all my life. Most of my career was spent as a respiratory therapist up until mid-COVID, because we're still in COVID right now. I didn't tell my coworkers or my colleagues because of shame and guilt, or this idea like, hey, you work with patients, you work with ventilators. Should you be doing this? Because there's so many assumptions about people with mental health diagnosis, right? And I didn't want to deal with that. But when I came to NCG, it was interesting because I felt safe really early on with the colleagues in my department. And I shared with them, I said, hey, I need support with this. And I told them why, and they was like, yeah, whatever. In a good way. And that was good. Like, okay, what you need. Like it wasn't this big long conversation. And I know everybody doesn't have that, right? But you have the power right now if you are not open to incorporate that in how you open and how you hire to be aware, of some of those things. So we'll start with the definition, neurodiversity. JQ is going to drop a link in the chat, but for now, you can use the QR code to go to it, but JQ will drop a link for it in the chat as well. And so this is one of the definitions, right? And it's key on one because everybody has their own interpretations of what that means. It simply means the diversity of the human brain. That's it. We all have wide varieties of different things, and we can't just pinpoint exactly what it is. Again, normal is a setting on the washing machine, so we aren't comparing it to anything. So just keep that in mind when you hear that term. And then here, these are a lot of conditions that are talked about when we talk about neurodiversity, with the number one being autism and number two being ADHD. These are just a few. But the thing I want you to pay attention to is this bottom one that says acquired neurodiversity. And it's important that you pay attention to this one specifically because this is the one that we most deal with, right? Acquired neurodiversity, that means something happened to you and now you have a neurodiverse condition or your brain has changed from what it was for you, right? Not different from human. And so I'll give you an example. When I was 17, I had my first car. It was a 1988 Cougar. It was real nice. It was used, but I had low miles. I was excited about it. I had a car note or anything like that. And I was waiting to turn left to go see my grandma. And I looked up in front of me and there was a car stopped in front of me too. We both had a red light. And his kids in the back of the car, just playing and horsing around and things like that. And so I giggled, and then I looked in my rearview mirror and I saw a car coming at full speed. But it was so quick, it was nothing I could do. So I put my feet on the brake because I know it's kids in the car in front of me. So I'm hoping that if I have my feet on the brake, when I get hit, it won't hit the car in front of me. So the car hits me. I'm fine. And then they drove off. Somehow they drove off, and I was still able to make it to my grandma's house. But I didn't use my rearview mirror for 2 years after that. And oftentimes I don't use it now, right? I use my side view mirrors. I depend on my side view mirrors before because the trauma of that still can stick with you. So you never know, what it's going to be. But that was a part of the thing that changed my brain. It didn't cause me to have ADHD. Probably always had that, but just know that everybody can experience something that causes a change. And then, when we talk about how common autism and ADHD are, you might know some folks that have told you they are autistic or ADHD, but those are only the people that have a diagnosis. Because again, the diagnosis is a privilege, so be cognizant of that. And you shouldn't assume either. Neurodivergent is a word you might hear. Often we're slowly going away from that because neurodivergent says you are different from a neurotypical brain, right? This definition is pretty problematic because it speaks to autism specifically, and this is found in Merriam-Webster, and JQ will drop a link for that as well, but not affected with a developmental disorder, and especially autism spectrum disorder, exhibiting or characteristic of, something's covering my screen right here. Whatever the last word is, it's covered by the Zoom bar. But this is problematic because it talks directly about autism. And so this article, they'll teach you more about the problematic things that come with using wrong words because it becomes weaponized against folks with mental health conditions, whether they diagnosed or undiagnosed. And so this is I took this screenshot directly from Merriam-Webster. You can click on the blue parts. When you go to the site, I encourage you to really read around that because these are the words you will hear. It's important that if you hear a person that has a neurodiverse condition using the word neurodivergent, you don't correct them, right? It's not up to us. We are not the word police when somebody is talking about themselves, right? It's just, you can just take note of it and move right along. Neuroexpansion and JQ will drop a link for this as well, is a term coined by the Black and disabled community, and it's rejection of the word neurodivergent and ideology that undergirds it. And it's also because neuroexpansive is better than neurodivergent because that was used as a weapon. It was weaponized. You can't do this because you have this. You can't be hired because of those things. I personally like neurospicy, is the one I like to use when I'm talking about myself. It's the one I most use on social media. But you might hear different things. Again, it's not up to you to decide if it's wrong or right when somebody's talking about themselves, but do be aware of the terms. Some potential challenges that comes for this for both the employee and employer, you may get encouraged to do things faster and harder, right? And that's a problem because first of all, you didn't say that in the job description or the interview, that it was a certain speed. Most of the time that didn't happen, right? Again, folks that are just opening, you have the power to lead this work because you can start interviews like that. You can make more inclusive job descriptions, and I'll share some with you, within this paper. But you shouldn't do that. When this idea came for this presentation, I was at a co-op, and one of the leaders of the co-op said, "I have a person that takes 4 hours to do something that should take 2 hours." And I'm like, "Well, I don't have any expertise in food. Like, what happens if it's not done in 2 hours?" And he said, "Well, I don't know. It's just always been done that way," which is not an answer. And I said, "Well, did you say that it had to be done in 2 hours?" "Well, no." Right. And these are things to think about. And if you are a new co-op you're going into an old building too, like pre-ADA, meaning there's not certain things for folks that are disabled, whether that be stairs or, the bathroom is teeny tiny. It's something to think about that, because now you're cutting off 25% of the workforce by saying you are not going to have people who can't do certain things, although you didn't name what those certain things are. If you are in an old co-op, meaning it's in an old building, you already have 50% of the workforce cut off because it's not accessible to people that might have physical disabilities that cause them going upstairs, causing them to get into small spaces if the aisles are small. So that's 50% of the job market that can apply. And now you have another 25% with neurodiverse condition. I've been to 86 co-ops, and I've never been to one co-op that said they didn't have open positions, right? And so you cannot be one of those. Like, you can do things you need to do to start off on the right foot. Being late in scheduling, I'll share this again, but we have to be in the job description. What time do you actually need me to be there? Don't say morning shift, don't say night shift, don't say afternoon, say exactly what it is. Not only to save you time, but to save the person that's applying angst. It's like, I don't know if I can do this. Being narrow focused with providing instructions. The example I just gave, nobody ever told this person, like, "Hey, I need you to get this done in 2 hours." Maybe it was doable, but it took them 4 hours, right? And so we have to take ownership and start off the right way so it can continue being that way. And then completing modules or writing and reading aloud. I've been in a lot of clubs that there is no space. There aren't no break rooms. There are no employee rooms where you can have quiet time, but some people really need that. One of the first time I did this presentation in a co-op before they opened, they were doing construction above me. And right when I said this, they dropped something, right? And everybody jumped, but a few people were completely discombobulated and couldn't continue on, right? And so even if you can't provide a space where there isn't tons of commotion, there's a little bit quiet, can you provide noise canceling headphones? Can you provide them access to do the things that you require at home? And then the trainer, not trained to train. And this is not about trained to do the job. It's interpersonal skills that's required to show somebody how to do your job. In co-ops, a lot of positions are created, or you kind of fall into the position, or you are developed into that position. So you're already at a thing like, well, I have to show them how I do it because I'm the only one that has done it, right? And then using colloquialism or common phrases. This is a really big one because there's assumption that we all know what these phrases are. America does it different. Like, every country has something different, but in America, here are a few examples. And all these came out of co-ops from when I've been doing this presentation. From soup to nuts, there's a 60-year-old woman I work with, and she's great. And during the presentation, she said, she went from soup to nuts, and I had no idea what that meant. And so I spent a lot of time Googling it. And I came to find out it meant from breakfast to the end of a meal. Now, I've never ate nuts for dessert, but somebody did and came up with this, right? And we couldn't figure out, like, is it a culture thing? Is it an age thing? We don't know these things, but not everybody understands these. And a lot of them are violent. It's been pounded into my brain. Don't beat around the bush. I hit a roadblock. Don't throw me under the bus. Just ballpark it. That is, we say it all the time. I've said some already during this presentation. So it's hard. This is not a point your finger thing, but just pointing it out that people may not understand. I was going to say, when you see that deer in the headlights look, that's another one. Think about it, like, man, what did I just say that this person might not understand? Don't get bent out of shape. And then these two, let's call a spade a spade. The history of that is extremely racist, right? And you only know when you know. But I've used that term before I found out what it meant. And then it's crazy in here. Crazy is a word that has been weaponized. It's the hardest word to switch away from. But the best word to use is wild. I'm like, man, I had a wild day, right? Because again, some words have been weaponized against a certain population. Other things, are there signs? How does checkout work? Is it clearly marked? If you are a new co-op and you have the ability to offer self-checkout, and I encourage you to, not because it's against whatever we think the modern co-op is, because that has multiple interpretations. But some people don't want a friendly cashier. Some people want to come in, get their stuff, and leave. A lot of people have social anxiety and other things that don't involve them having this conversation. We saw more people with social anxiety shopping during COVID because everybody was wearing a mask and nobody wanted to talk. It's like, I felt normal today. I had clients that said I felt normal today because I went and bought my own food. I did Instacart today. I saved money today. And so there's always arguing about what self-checkout for, and that's taking away the interactions, but some people don't need the interaction. How does bulk work? Bulk is super scary for me. I'm the person that will have a pile of dry goods and wet goods on the floor in front of me. And every co-op I went into is slightly different, right? And so is there a sign up to say, like, hey, can you, this is how you do it step by step, or ask me if you need some help? And then that's hard too, because there's a perception that if you have to ask questions, then maybe you are not smart, or other words that aren't very nice. What does your signage look like? And these are good questions to ask your team as you are building up this co-op. Can you put images as well as words? Co-ops are good for having pictures of fruits and vegetables everywhere. We know how to work with images, so what can we do to support folks? Are employees prepared to assist and not just front end? There's not many resources out there in the co-op or food industry to support front end workers besides de-escalation, which is burdensome, right? But they get everything first. It shouldn't just be them, right? It shouldn't just be them. And then sensory issues, and this is a really big one and something to be aware of. Again, as you are hiring, sensory issues, it's not just touch and feel, it's sight and the smells. And so a lot of people are bothered by the bulk and wellness section because the smells are so strong. So while I find it enjoyable, it could be pretty scary for some folks. So you might not get people that apply for those reasons because maybe they know that, but a lot of people don't know that their sensory issues might be triggered in bulk or wellness, right? And so just be aware of who you have in your staff. Listen to them if they bring these things up, because you can work with these folks. And so, offering small adjustments to a workspace might be helpful for folks with sensory needs. Like one of the things I heard of a lot in co-ops is the steel counters that's in the back. Sometimes just putting a little piece of plastic over it might help. With sound sensitivity, offering a quiet break space, that might not be, you might not be able to do that at your co-op, but you can provide noise canceling headphones that everybody can use that are washable. You can get some really good ones for cheap. If you know about any drills, if you know about any construction coming on, of course you can't know everything, but you can try your best to let folks know. Allow the use of fidget toys. When I'm providing therapy to my clients, I have a fidget toy. Like I always have, I'm always looking for something to move my hand. Even right now, I'm twisting my ring around under the table because I left my fidget toys, right? And so allow things like that if you can. It's important to have multiple heights of seating. Sometimes your nerves can be triggered if you have to get up too fast from a low spot, and that's all that's available in the break room or a place of rest. And then if you do have a, uniform, not many, I haven't noticed many co-ops have uniforms, which I think is cool, but allow people to change them. There was one co-op who was triggered by the apron. I think it was denim or something, that the apron, it would touch their neck. And so they told one of their supervisors, like, I don't know what to do about it. But they allowed her to put felt around the neck so she wouldn't be triggered by it. So, just being more open and not so rigid about things we've historically been rigid about. And I can't see, I don't know if I can move this bar. Okay, maybe that's better.
Yeah, usually.
And then encourage, I got it. And then encourage folks to take their breaks versus skipping them. I say that because retail workers are the #1 group with urinary tract infection because we're not peeing. And then healthcare workers are #2, right? Because we are either holding our pee because we're too busy, or it's busy and we don't want to let our coworkers down. But start off, encourage them like, hey, you have to take your break. You have to go sit down. You have to go outside, get some fresh air. And then this one is always pretty controversial. Sometimes it's related to generational. I've noticed the conversations I've had with older folks, they attribute it to like, oh, they're just lollygagging and listening to music and not paying attention to the customers. And that, that might be true. But oftentimes having an earbud, even if it doesn't have music, can be super helpful. And they make other things specifically for sensory issues that can be placed in your ear. So if that's the issue, maybe that's something the co-op should invest in. It's fairly inexpensive. And then training standard for all employees. Again, being a co-op that's not open yet, it's perfect time to think of multiple ways. When I've talked to other co-ops that are established, we don't have time to make multiple types of training. It has to be done this way. It's just not true. Because if you make one with one employee, you can just use that down the line. So it's not like you're making them with every employee, you're getting input, right? So some people may learn best if they follow you, then do it. If they do it with you, if you have a list and they do it, we have multiple ways to do things. But again, that will, determine the co-op success and the success of that employee, and more importantly, retention. Because every time you have to train somebody else, you spend the money that could have stayed in a co-op. Can a new employee be asked how they learn best to, before their first day? That could be an HR thing, or whoever is doing the hiring. Like, hey, can you share with me the best way you learn? You might get some I don't knows, or you might get some things that you can't provide, and that's okay. You're like, well, I don't know if we can provide that, but we'll try, right? And so now you're already showing them that there's a community of care. You've already started it before they step foot in their role. Did the trainer receive training on being a trainer? Absolutely not. And so this is talking about the job. We roll into the job. Sometimes it's made up. The job I have at NCG did not exist before I had it, right? And so, but now if I decide to leave, maybe I'll have to train somebody else. So I'm gonna train them to what I've learned. Maybe that's not what the organization wants. Just share as much information as you can. Did the trainer know they would be training in advance? Probably not. Probably not. But a way you can do that, because they'll say, like, I don't know when the employee will be here. You can say, like, hey, I'm hiring for a deli assistant. When we hire that person, you will be the person that trained them. And so now they know it's coming. So it's no shock, like, oh, what do you mean? So again, giving people as advanced notice as possible. Is there more than one trainer on duty? Probably not. It's not. But there needs to be a plan in place in advance so that the person that's being trained don't feel like they're a nuisance because they are there without the person supposed to train. They have a backup plan, like, okay, if this person isn't here, you're going to go to this department, or you're going to be with that person. And then did the trainer volunteer or voluntold? Lots of times it's voluntold, and that's fine. I know that's how it works, but oftentimes when we pick the same people to train, we may be skipping over other people that can train, right? And then there are some people that just shouldn't, right? And so, as you're thinking about this, who's going to do what? These are some things to keep in mind. All these things, although we've been talking about neurodiversity, will not only help people with neurodiverse conditions. All these things are things you should do to create accessibility. Because again, folks might not tell you, and there is no ADA accommodation for most of these things. And then inform people about workplace norms, like, hey, we do this on this day. Not saying you have to include them in party time, but if you have something that's specific to your co-op, tell the folks when they start. If you already have a board and a group of people that's been doing something, and you hire your first employee, don't just tell them about what's going on at the co-op and what they have to do. Talk about the vibe within the people that you'll be working with, the people that you'll have to connect with often. Consider the stigma. A lot of people might not share what their diagnosis is. You may never know. I went to an affinity group, and it was a person that this was the first time they disclosed they had a mental health condition. And they worked at an organization 15 years, but they were afraid because of their previous experience. And when he disclosed, nobody cared. It was like, oh, okay, cool. You need something? And that is a good reaction to have. Like, what you need? What can I, instead of asking more questions, we should mind our own business. We don't have to take a deep dive if there's nothing we need to know. Everybody's version of safety is different. How I felt safe when I lived in Idaho is very much different than how I feel safe living in Detroit. Right. And so we have to ask these things. This is another thing that would be good for our interview question. Try to give advance notice when things are changing. Folks with neurodiverse conditions, they need to prepare for things. You won't be able to do this all the time, and that's okay. But attempt it. Attempt to include logic too, reasoning behind why. So now it becomes a learning opportunity for both parties. And then don't ask assumptions. Not everybody wants to be in management. Some people just want to come to work and do their job and go home, and that's fine. Don't assume what people need. You'll never know. It's the easiest thing to do, and to get the best response is to ask. And avoid sarcasm, implied messages, and euphemisms. Again, America, we got to do better. We have a lot of them. Here are a few from co-ops. They passed away. What does that mean? They died. We have to say exactly what it means. He is over the hill. He is old. Probably shouldn't say that at all. But if you want to say something like that, be direct. My tank is on empty. I presented this at one of the conferences, at a co-op before they opened. And one of the folks said, like, what about he's under the weather? He's like, if you think about all the weather is above us, so we all under it. Because that's what it means if you take it apart. She has been let go from the company. He is between jobs. He does not have a job. She is feeling under the weather. He is creative with the truth. He is a liar. Probably shouldn't say that one either. But still, if we have to, we need to be direct. And then tips to support employees: be concise with instructions, with tasks, and break down stuff like, hey, I need you to stock this shelf like this. This needs to be, facing forward. And I need you to do it in 2 hours. And it can get done. A lot of folks with neurodiverse conditions are extremely particular. And having instructions like that could be super helpful. Job descriptions when hiring, be explicit as possible. Say exactly what you need. One thing I've seen on job descriptions, there's a lot of copy and paste because we don't have a lot. And co-ops are starting out. I'm sure they borrow from other co-ops as they should. Co-ops should be helping them. But look at it and make sure it fits. It shouldn't be a job for, let's say, a greeter that says must be able to lift 50 pounds above your head. That was copied from another job description. But if you put that out there, you might get less candidates because people are reading for exactly, what it is. And then just to be patient. That's all you can do is be patient. Most things that we do in the co-op space are not emergent. So just be patient. Here's an example. Looking for a full-time employee to work afternoon shift Tuesday through Sunday on the front end. Right? Not very open at all. Doesn't talk about all the things, but it's quick. It is believed by the person who wrote it to be straight to the point, and that they should be able to garner a lot of employees coming into their new co-op to do these things. A better option would be looking for an employee to work Tuesday and Thursday from 11 to 7, Wednesday and Friday from 12 to 8, Saturdays from 3 to 11. You may have to go outside to support curbside pickups on the weekend. So it's many things. People have in their head what day shift and night shift is. If you tell me I'm working day shift, I'm thinking 7 a.m. because I worked in a hospital for 15 years and we had 2 shifts, 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. I'm gonna automatically think that. There was a co-op who hired somebody in the bakery and they were so excited. And, after their interview and orientation, like, okay, we'll see you tomorrow at 4 a.m. It was like, wait a minute. You said morning shift. I didn't think, 4 a.m. So now time has been spent. You've went through the hiring process. They have a uniform, but they can't do it because they can't get up at 4 a.m. Right? And so, yes, it could be on an employee, but really it's on an employer to share as much as you can in advance. The other thing that's important, it says you might have to go outside for curbside pickup. on the weekends. That tells you need to bring a jacket. You don't know what the weather conditions are. What if you show up and it turns freezing cold? If you live in Michigan, there's 4 seasons each day. You have to be prepared for those things as much as you can. But say that in the job description. Other employees to start during the interview, cultivating relationships of care. On their first day, reaffirm like, hey, we're happy to have you. Please reach out if there is something that you need, but also ask if you think it's something that we can change. Coming into like co-ops, like when I come in, because I don't have history of working in co-ops, I'm an outsider, right? And so every new employee will be considered to be an outsider. Like maybe they see something that you didn't. They might have good ideas. Have intentional interactions. I would say go far as to put them on your calendar to reconnect, with new employees, or as you hire them, especially the person that found them and hired them. Encourage seasoned employees. So once you get in and you have your first set employees, those are the most important. That they were there for opening, but those should be the folks that follow the people that come after that. And then create a safer space for disclosure. I say safer because safe spaces don't exist. We can only govern ourselves. You can't guarantee what everybody else is doing. So like, oh, it's a safe space. Not true. We don't know that. There have been many tragedies that happened in places that were safe, called a safe space. But what you can do is govern yourself. Make sure you remain open. That doesn't mean you have to be super friendly, but that has to start open because people will tell you the things that they need. And then prioritize acceptance over understanding. This is a really important one. I think a lot of times in people's life, in order for them to accept things, they feel like they have to understand them. I'll give you an example. In last February, I spoke at a nursing conference on a cruise ship. And a woman stood up. She stood up, and the first thing she said was, I'm 70. The name of the presentation I was doing was providing queer inclusive healthcare. I don't remember the title, but it was supporting queer and trans people. And the woman got up, she said, I'm 70 and I've been a nurse a long time. I said, congratulations, because I knew this was leading to somewhere that I probably wasn't gonna like based on how she was looking at me. I'm like, oh, you about to say it. And she said, I understand boys liking boys and girls liking girls, but I don't understand how a boy could like a girl. I would want to be a girl, and I don't understand how a girl could want to be a boy. And you need to help me understand that so I can treat my patients better. So after we had a few pleasantries, my wife was standing in the back shaking her head because she knew where it was going. I asked the rest of the crowd, and I had maybe 150 nurses in there. I said, how many people here also have trouble understanding the existence of trans people? And 3/4 of the room raised their hand. And I said, well, and that's okay, because you don't have to understand their existence to accept that they exist. Most of these things have nothing to do with you. It does not matter. My brother right now is married to a woman that I don't know why he picked her, right? But I have to accept it. Like, this is who he loves. It's not my business, and I have a niece. We are able to understand things, but oftentimes we are not, and we still can accept them. We still can accept things more so to understand. So let's prioritize acceptance, because you're not going to understand everything. Here's another example. What kind of assistance do you need to get the job done, right? This is all about the job. How can we help you get the job done? So this makes it all about the co-op. A better example would say, in what ways can I support you in performing at your best in this role? And that is, again, how you start cultivating care. You made it about the person and the co-op, right? Like, yes, we want you to do well, but also this. Other tips. Curbside pickup or walk-in. There are, and I include this if you are a co-op that's going to be serving an elder population. But I went to a co-op and somebody called on the phone, and I saw them walking up and down the aisle, and it was an elder on the phone going shopping on the phone with a person, right? And although that worked for that elder, it originally wasn't started for that. It was originally started because the community that the co-op was in didn't have good internet use. And because most people came into the co-op, but during COVID, they didn't. So they just still make sure elder folk got this. So they started that and it continued on. But what they found that it wasn't only elder folk calling, it was folks that wanted to talk about what they wanted to buy, but they had social anxiety and didn't want to come into the store, and they didn't have internet, or they just wanted to talk to somebody at that time without being like, hey, how you doing? Let's get it done. So just thinking of multiple things. I think there's a link for this one too, JQ. And then communicate with the members too. There might not be, but it might be. Maybe it's not listed. I'll circle back with it. Communicate ahead of time for changes in and outside the store. If you know about construction, if you know something's going to be blocked off because the road is going to be worked on. Sometimes you don't, right? We only, know what we can know. This is also important leading up to the store. I'm, in Detroit, so I'm excited about DPFC opening. But most of the time it's been a construction site. Now it's slowly changing. So we kind of like staying up to date. So we know where it's at, but also folks with neurodiverse conditions really need to know so they don't show up a place that might trigger them. And then with sensory overwhelm, you can create these sensory bags. You can buy them, but you can really create them with inexpensive things, right? Most of the things you can find at the dollar store, most of the things are reusable, washable. They can be used for potential members, but also for employees. There is a store that has, and I'll show it at the end, but there is a store that does sensory hours or sometimes a sensory day. Doesn't mean that anybody else can't come in, but it does mean that the sound, is cut down, that the register beeps are cut down. There isn't music playing. It might seem like a boring day, but for somebody, this might be the best day for them to come in. And then I would say this is the most important. I love these two terms. Why am I talking? Because a lot of time when we meet folks and we assume that they are different from us, or we hear they have a condition that, again, we don't understand, but we are forced to accept. That's it. Why did I say patient? Because I'm always doing patients. But decide why you're continuously talking. If you make a mistake, apologize and move on. Usually it's us making ourselves comfortable because we feel uncomfortable. It's the same way when somebody passes away and the first thing you say, look, I said passes away. Y'all catch it? And the first thing you say, don't worry, it'll be okay, because you feel uncomfortable with death. Most people feel uncomfortable with death. So we really have to think about that when we talk to folks, especially after they share ways they need support. And then for folks that still continue, why am I still talking? Waste, right? Sometimes just back out, figure out a way to leave that conversation. Very common in interviews if they decide to disclose in interviews, because now the person providing the interviewer is uncomfortable. And so a lot of times we talk more when we're uncomfortable. Those are important things to think about. And if all else fails, just remember to focus on RATs, relationship and rapport building. The two most important things. People talk with no problem. Accommodations, ADA and beyond when possible. Again, ADA has not been updated and probably won't be in a long time. Be explicit with needs and expectations. None of these things are things that will only help people with neurodiverse conditions. Most grocery stores have doors that open automatically. While that'll help a person in a wheelchair, that'll also help an elder who doesn't have enough strength to open the door. Right, so it's also it's multiple things. If you have an elevator, that doesn't just help the person, in the wheelchair. It might help an elder, but it also might help an employee who had an injury to still be able to have a job, with accommodations. And then think about sensory experiences and support. If you have staff already, or if you have board members, ask your board members, do they have any issues that y'all can talk about, so they can be aware to think about for the employees as they're coming in, to think about members. You have a lot of experience with your board and with the members that volunteer. Just ask those questions now so you can get started. And that's it. And I'm going to pull up, JQ, will you say this? Because I want to pull up the sensory hour document really quick. Okay. Oh, good, 13. Not that. If y'all have questions, you can unmute and ask. Now I'll answer while I'm pulling this up for y'all.
Gabby, I had a question.
Yeah.
A lot of the information you shared, first of all, it was amazing and a million things I never thought of, so thank you. But a lot of it is really operational in nature, meaning things we should be thinking about is for our store once it's open, or as we're
Mhm.
setting it up to open. Are there things we should be thinking about as far as like board practices when it comes to being more inclusive? An example for me is we require our directors on our board to be able to access electronic communications on an online platform.
Mhm.
So I'm trying to think of like things we can expand to more board inclusivity.
Yeah, I think it's so odd because I don't understand board governance as much in co-op space. Like I've worked with boards and consulted with different boards, but it's just so different. For some reason, it's so different because there seems to be a separation of employees and members. And I think the education that some of the staff can receive, the board can receive too, because eventually it might interact. Eventually, you might have employees, depending on how you set up employees on the board, right? I also think it might be good to share that, like when you are looking for more board members. A lot of times in those board postings, and JQ, stop me if I get on the soapbox, we talk a lot about diversity. And those board persons, they say diversity, but nobody says exactly what that means because all the words that come along with that are uncomfortable. Most of the time when they write it, on a posting, they mean black or brown, or somebody with a visual physical disability because it can be seen, so you can show the community, like, look what we got, we diverse, right? But everybody's afraid to say it, and so you have to think about inclusion more so than diversity because diversity can be passive. Diversity should be passive. When you include people and you're equitable, those are two things you can do on purpose, right? So saying exactly what you need, like, hey, you can say it. I'm looking for neurodiverse folks to join the board. It's not tokenizing if you're honest. They have the option to apply or not. Period. It's up to them. So the board has a duty to be more honest in what they are looking for. The board. I've worked with boards, and they receive education from me too. They can reach out, and I'm not telling you to reach out to me for education, but they need to know the same thing, especially because y'all are staff that's unpaid staff right now. Y'all are unpaid staff of the co-op. I'm on DPFC board, and it's wild how many things I do unpaid um, as a board member. But the same way you seek out supports for oncoming staff and whoever the GM is, the board should be seeking content education too, not training, education, because education signals a path. Training signals completion. So I hope that answered.
Yeah, I was just thinking, as you were talking, a lot of the recruitment things that you were mentioning would probably apply to recruiting a board member as well. So
Mhm. It helps too with retention. There out how much time? Okay, I'm really quick. When I lived in Idaho, is not a racially diverse place. If any of you live in Idaho, if you heard the word, whatever you're thinking is true about the state. So when I lived in Idaho, I worked at a hospital called St. Luke's, and in the St. Luke's system, there were 7 hospitals. Out of the 7 hospitals, there was one Black therapist. It was me, one Black respiratory therapist. Out of the 7 hospitals, there was only 2 people that were out queer. I was one of them, and I was the only person with a master's degree out of the 7 hospital system. I stayed there 5 years. The entire 5 years I worked there, although I had other options. But I didn't stay because it was diverse, because it was not in any way. In any way. But I stayed because I felt included. My opinion matters, right? Representation is important, but if you try to bring in folks that are Black or brown, because that's normal, I'm bringing that up because that's what people usually mean when they say diversity. It is an act of violence to bring them into a space that's not ready to receive them, right? You have to be ready to receive them. The same thing goes for co-ops. You cannot, advertise a group of people that are racially ambiguous or stock photos with Black, brown, and folks in wheelchairs. And then you hire somebody, they believe that this is what I'm walking into, but it wasn't. Because people advertise for what they want and not what they have. People don't not come because representation. I'm sorry, people don't avoid applying because they don't see reputation there. I think that is a farce that says racial diversity doesn't exist because it's not already there. But people lie. People lie about what they're walking into. You know, you have to be honest about what you walk into, and so we miss out. So
I'm going to mention real quick that I don't know if what you think of this, Gabby. My board is just a step because you got to be digital, got to be digital. It's a very college town. And we had someone join the board who very much was not. Wonderful board member, and basically left from feeling super excluded and unaccommodated. And then the board went one step, and it's a tiny step, but I was amazed by the outcomes of it. Was just to say, these are board expectations, and if you have difficulty meeting any of these board expectations, let's have a conversation about how we can accommodate you so you can be a valuable part of the team. And they had 2 board members who are already on the board who reached out about things they did not know about. And so even just that statement, I don't know what you think of that, was at least a step in the right direction.
Yeah, I think so. And I think if there are things that you cannot change, you have to say that. If it's all digital because there are no in-person meetings, there's a generation gap. And sometimes there is something with social anxiety, but it has to be digital. That needs to go in the description. Because if they are not, you don't necessarily have to change for everybody because you'll be constantly changing. But at least tell them that before they join. Why are you gonna waste their time?
Yeah.
Or your time, because now you're gonna have to elect somebody else. Right. So the more more tips we share, the better. And again, this is not just for folks with neurodiverse conditions. This is something that helps everybody. You know, so any other questions?
I'll just jump in with a comment and a question, but a great presentation. Thank you. I especially like the euphemisms that, thinking about those. Is this one that you're going to be able to share, JQ?
Yeah, I'll share it.
Okay.
You'll be sharing the slides? Okay, yes, then I'll be emailing the slides.
Thank you. Thanks.
And if there's something you don't understand, just reach out. Because I am flawed as well. Like everybody's on a journey to learning more. So I'm always interested in ways to make it more accessible. I don't have any text messages from folks. Okay. Make sure I got everybody. Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to pull up somebody asked, so I'm going to pull it up.
The sensory hour?
Yep, this is sensory hour. This is from, I move this thing out the way, from PCC. They started the sensory hour. They first started with just doing one day, just to see how it goes. They called and asked about sensory bags. I encouraged them to make their own, but I think they were on a tight deadline, so they might have purchased them. But if you have the capacity, I do encourage, then this can be a community event, especially for co-ops that aren't open. Ask the volunteers to come in and help make sensory bags. Because in that, not only do they get to learn about sensory stuff, but now they're helping the community. And so again, we're going into it with more knowledge than we've had before. So this is what goes out to the staff to be prepared for what it's like. I like this thing, lead with kindness, use patience. You will not know. You can't ask people either. So if you treat everybody nice and open, and be tentative, you'll be able to tell really quick if they need something, or they'll feel safe enough to tell you exactly what they need. And I have permission to share this too from PCC, so I'll send this to you as well, JQ. Yeah. And I'm sure Kate, well, maybe not. Let me not say that while I was recording. But I'm sure there might be other folks that are willing to support if it's something that you want to take on. I think it's super cool for co-ops to think about this now. The co-ops I've been in right before they open has been super helpful for not only the staff supporting customers, but also the leaders supporting staff, right? Because ultimately the community that the leadership is supporting is the employees, but the community that the employees are supporting is the community that's coming in as shoppers and owners, right? So it's not good enough for just the leaders to have the education. Staff has to have it too.
All right, are we, any last questions before we wrap up? Okay, you're gonna see me put a link in the chat right now. This is the survey. It takes 1 minute to give us feedback if this was a useful session for you so we can keep planning. And also it helps us keep these free. So if you can give us feedback, just that 1 minute of your time, we'd really appreciate it. I want to thank Gabby so much for bringing this conversation and always creating such a warm, welcoming space for people to learn. We really appreciate you.
Thank you. I can stay behind a couple of minutes.
Okay,
About
so
2
we're
minutes
going
or
to,
so.
I'm going to do my wrap-up slides I need to do with y'all. We're going to wrap up this video, and then anyone who wants to stay, Gabby has offered to stay a few minutes if there are additional questions or just questions you'd be more comfortable asking not being recorded. That's also a real thing. So we wanted to thank again our champion sponsors, Gluminate and National Co-op Grocers, for making the series possible. We really appreciate them. We have 11 more sessions in the series next week. We have our second week. So go check this out. You do need to register and register more than 10 minutes before the session starts if you're going to get the link in time, okay? So please go check those out on our website. And that is at fci.coop and the /events/FCI Live. Thank you again to our broader sponsors for making the session possible, and we hope everybody has a terrific week.